California is one of the few states that actually does provide funding for abortion. In most parts of this country, from the funding, from the prevention side all the way down to the actual provision of services, we have seen a number of steps that are similar to what you described. We've seen efforts to impose not only parental involvement or notification laws. We've also seen regulations that have to do with the size of doorways and the
doorways in the clinics.
And just a series of legal pressures to make to make it harder to run a health center that does provide abortion services, right?
Legal burdens.
Legal burdens, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. We've also seen in these very propositions that we voted down 3 times, we hope, in California, we've seen the first version actually included language that was also hidden in, that was meant to redefine abortion. So we think that there's always a lot in the details. We think it is probably part of a larger strategy. But, in the end, what it boils down to, again, not to be simplistic, but really at the core of this is the health and safety of that teen. That's really what we're concerned about. It is a constitutional amendment. It's dangerous. It's part of a larger pattern, but first and foremost, it will put teens at risk.
Now, because it's a constitutional amendment, that's a very good point. It means that the courts would not be able to modify in any way, really, or let alone undo this measure. And so if parts of it are unworkable, or if judges in their judgment were to say, this is cruel, their hands would be tied, wouldn't they?
Exactly. And that's because we have followed the legal course in California, and the Supreme Court found that these laws are dangerous to teens. I mean, we have rulings, we have we have decades of litigation on this matter, and everyone, again, the doctors, teachers, counselors, everyone that provides this care in the day-to-day for adolescents has said, you know what, this is not going to actually help those teens who most need our help, and if she's in crisis, this is going to put her in greater danger. So there is no way out. There is no recourse, and it's constitutionally dangerous, and also in the real world. Yes.
The anti-choice folks call this law Sarah's Law. It's not a law; it's a constitutional amendment, actually, but they call it Sarah's Law, and they say that they claim their primary motivation is to protect kids who are in sexually abusive relationships with adult males, and that this will force those relationships to be outed at the clinic, essentially, and then to be stopped by the authorities because of the reporting of the sexual abuse. Is there anything to that?
Well, first of all, Sarah was someone who actually had a different name. It's a very sad case that actually comes from Texas. From another state, from another time as well, from 1994. And her name was actually Jamie Garcia. Jamie Garcia Yanes Villegas was her full name.
And that's not so good for at least for white voters, to have a Spanish name for the law, is it?
It certainly doesn't sound like Sarah. And so she was 15 when she passed away. And it's tragic. She was a mother, and she already had a child, and she was married. So nothing under this proposition would have applied to her.
Because married minors are exempted from the coverage of this proposition.
Exactly. So we believe that our opposition, the yes side, has really exploited a sad case. But more importantly, they had to reach across time and space into another state, into another decade, to exploit this situation. And it was someone who wouldn't have been, she wouldn't have been affected in any way under this proposition. But to answer the more important question, this is where to be honest with you, I have to say that I get quite upset at any suggestion that I or anyone that I work with would in any way ever cover up for predators. It's a ridiculous accusation. Planned Parenthood has been around for nearly 100 years. We're investigated by the Department of Health and Human Services.
Under Bush, under Republican administration.
Under this administration, they found no instance of negligence. So we believe that they're grasping at straws because we do have caring, licensed, mandated reporters working at the health centers who are going to do everything in their power to report and detect these kinds of situations of abuse. And you know what? It's more likely that we will be able to intervene when young women are going into health centers where there are people who actually care for them, when they're not going underground, when they're not trying to sort things out on their own, when they're not traveling to other states, which is what we see in other parts of the country where you try to push down on one side, you'll see there's an increase on the other side of the border. So that's not something anyone wants, delays in care, travel out of state, and teenagers who are trying to sort things out on their own in a desperate way.
So not Sarah, not applicable, and not right.
That's an excellent summary.
It's also important, I think, to point out that far from being negligent, that what Planned Parenthood also does is advocate for sex education with the goal, among other things, of reducing abortions. I mean, there was a slogan at one point which I think certainly encapsulates the way I feel, which is that abortion should be safe, legal, and uncommon.
You know, that's another excellent point, and 97% of our services are devoted to prevention, to providing sex education. In fact, we have parent-child communication programs because we know it's a difficult matter, and we know it's touchy. We know that that lots of parents feel like they need help, so we provide those programs. We provide access to care. We provide education and birth control to prevent pregnancy in as many cases as possible. So I always say to those on the yes side that we would welcome their help on November 5th, the day after Election Day, to prevent these situations in the first place, to help teens, especially those who are most vulnerable and in need. And, you know, that invitation is standing. I made it the first time around. I made it the second time around. And I've yet to see the players who try to impose this kind of onerous, punitive, cruel proposition on teens show up and help out the rest of the year when we really need that kind of support.
You know, really to close, to touch one final subject, Congressman Frank once said that the anti-choice folks who call themselves pro-life believe that life begins at conception and ends at birth, because that's really the end of their solicitude towards minors involved in abortion, towards supporting family planning, towards supporting welfare and assistance to the poor, and so on and so forth. Is this motivated by sincerely held religious beliefs? Is it motivated by cynicism? Is it motivated by attempts to distract people from the economy and help elect Republicans who are anti-working and middle-class people, many of them, on economic issues, but who use social issues as a cover for that? What's going on here in the larger picture?
Well, I'm a firm believer in assuming that others have good intentions. So my assumption, and you would really have to ask our opponents or proponents of this dangerous initiative what their motivation is. I would like to believe that it's a mistaken approach to protecting teens, because in that way I think that I would be able to speak to them really openly, just as I hope that I can to any other voter out there or any other parent, and say, look, I understand that you want this kind of involvement, you want this kind of, you want to be there. That makes sense. It really does. But we have to stop for a minute and think outside our bubble and consider teens who are in difficult situations, or even teens who might just be overwhelmed and make desperate choices because they're inexperienced or because they're afraid. That's what's really going on here. And I would like to believe that there's a positive motivation, because then I can only believe that they will vote no on Proposition 4